that's okay, $947, but we have to reduce that, by Rainbow Lake and Board of Election chargebacks. Is there anything else you reduce out of that?
We
Fran?
also reduce the tax cap figure by the chargebacks to the towns.
Yeah, so there's a reduction. So that brings us again to that 17,660,000, and budgeted, we're anticipating 17,400,000. So we also, Legislator Maroon, your question every year is what did we budget at sales tax, and we budgeted at 23,750,000. Last year we budgeted it at, I believe, 24 million. So that's a little bit of a reduction, but I think that's a good calculation there based on the climate that we're dealing with through the pandemic.
How are we doing right now with sales tax?
We are on target to hit budget.
But remember,
Well-
they did an audit and we had a settlement of over 600,000. Go
Yes.
ahead, Fran.
661,000 was part of an audit assessment that was done in May of 2020. So without that assessment, we would be coming in $661,000 short. With that assessment, we are on target to hit our budget.
In the last quarter, how have we been doing?
We got 7%.
There was a reduction in the last quarter from last year.
Right.
We are, if you compare this year to last year, we are $52,000 less in collections at this point. But a big part of that, like I said, was the 661 that we received in May. Without
In
that,
just
we would be
August,
much
I think we had about a 7% decrease
I think
in
it was
our sales
7.4
tax. What 7.4 in our sales tax collection in August?
But it went up in June and July.
It went up in June because of that $661,000 that we received.
Yeah,
That's why we were in the black in June. And then the summer collections were higher than anticipated, but not what they were last year.
There's Paul.
So you're saying that without the 600 and whatever thousand, we would be 500,000 less, roughly 550,000 less than last year?
Correct.
It's hard to believe. What? Okay. Go ahead.
Most of the counties, Franklin County is actually at a much higher percentage this year than any other county because of that assessment. There are a significant number of counties that are very much in the red this year,
30-40%,
percentage wise. I mean, they're reduced, some of them 20-30%. Just because we did go a large period in, March and April where sales tax numbers were very low.
Okay.
during the next week, one of the points of reference that I need to look at that's in this budget, I've hedged for two retirements for this year. And so what I've done is I've hedged for a reduction in those departments, but that's a little bit of a risk because if the person doesn't, if they don't retire. So I want to think that through a little bit more. So you might see a change come October 1st in that. I want to revisit. I've talked to department heads about it. I want to revisit those two departments.
That's $100,000.
What's that?
Over 100.
Oh, it's over 100.
That includes their wages and everything.
Yeah, and
right?
fringe.
But we may have to replace it.
I might have to put it back.
Yeah.
If someone decides not to retire. So that was a little bit risky, but that was one of the strategies that we used to, but I want to, now that we're almost into October, I want the department heads to revisit that with the employees. The healthcare costs, you'll notice that on page 167. This year, we're budgeting $7,231,324, and in 2020, it was 6.8 million, and in 2019, it was 6.9 million. So that's gone up. Our stop loss also has gone up in price quite a bit. one of the, in order to reduce the $714,802, remember, we have a new piece of highway equipment in the budget, and so Fran and I are, looking at using the Jericho Wind Farm Reserve and the Road Machinery Reserve funds to cover the expense of the sweeper. So we'll use the reserve of $255,108 from the highway reserves. And that would bring that gap to $459,694. So, questions?
What page are you on now?
Well, I sent you, a sheet.
Okay.
You scroll out.
Oh.
So I did wanna talk, go ahead, Paul.
No, go ahead, I'm just thinking. I was just thinking. So I don't have those sheets in front of me right at the minute, and I don't want to muck around with this because I'm having trouble with my laptop this morning, but so the way you've got it calculated now, with what you just said, the gap's 459,694, right?
Yep,
And that keeps us at what type of tax rate?
oh, yep. I have that. So right now, our increase in levy from last year would be 1.32%.
And that's under the tax cap?
It is, Fran, go ahead.
The tax cap, calculation, we are at 1.97%.
That's what we can go up to?
Levy, yeah, so we have an amount, we did not hit the tax cap this year. The tax cap limit was 18,319,947, and I have left $97,796 of the cap available to carry over to next year. We did not hit the cap, we're under the cap.
With a tax levy increase at 1.32%.
So we would increase the tax levy by 1.32%, in that, but we still have the gap with that, right?
We do. So I wanted to talk about, a few strategies. And I
Yep.
wanted to talk about, the DMV.
Yep.
And, so Kip, would you just want to talk about your plan that could possibly impact the budget for 2021?
Well, yeah, I mean.
By the way, excuse me, Kip. Kip and I had a long discussion this morning early, so I think I'm aware, and go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, sitting down and trying to figure out what we're going to do next year is obviously extremely difficult. We're trying to figure out a strategy to keep our DMV offices and also respectively social distance and get through the new year. Obviously, right now, the Saranac Lake office is been temporarily closed. So we have looked at a strategy for next year to see how we want to operate the two offices, and looking at the projections, with talking with Donna and Fran and sitting down and working on the budget, one of the things we decided to do is to continue to keep that office closed temporarily. We've suspended operations there. We were able to make up the difference plus in our Malone office by encouraging people to continue to do their transactions by mail, continuing to use the Dropbox. We're trying to develop some strategies to help the folks in the southern end of the county by different forms of Dropboxing and possibly using the transportation department to transfer transactions to Malone. And as we go forward, every month we're going to re-examine where we are. Obviously, speaking with Mr. Maroon this morning, he feels very similar to what Donna and I feel, that this is going to last a little while. So we have to take that into consideration. We've had to adjust our figures in our budget and try to make up differences and help the county increase its revenue by keeping our employees here in Malone, by continuing to work on the work that the state DMV sends us out of Albany, and also the work that gets sent to us out of the city, along with taking care of all our constituents. So we are gonna re-examine this as the months go along in the new year to see where we're at and to see if we can open that office back up. Currently, we can't. It's just, socially distancing wise, it's impossible to do, because your customers would be shoulder to shoulder, to each other, and the state just will not allow that to happen. So that's where we're at. So we made some adjustments in our budget. Revenue wise, our revenue will increase currently. We are, as we operate right now, we bring in probably 75% to 100% each month more than what we normally would, with the Saranac Lake office closed and those two employees working out of the Malone office. Our revenue has increased exponentially, and we expect that to continue to happen. Speaking with the Commissioner of Motor Vehicles last week, asking him when he thought this would all be over with, and his projection was 18 months before things get back to normal in DMV offices. So we have used his guidance along with the guidance of the budget officers and Donnie, and we've adjusted our budget accordingly.
What are other counties doing, Kev?
Other counties are unfortunately are closing satellite offices. They are struggling. Most counties are projecting out 3 months of appointments out in advance. I mean, with people not being able to get into offices. Jefferson County in the last 2 years have closed all of their satellite DMV offices. Essex County continues to have their Ticonderoga office closed. I'm not sure if they're going to reopen that one anytime soon. They're struggling with the same factors that we are here. There's a number of counties in the Finger Lakes that are not opening their offices, their satellite offices back up. We are not committing to that strategy. We are committing to a strategy at some point in time in the future. We will make every effort to open that office back up. It may not be January, it may be July, it may be a year from now in October. We've discussed all sorts of things. We've left everything on the table, but we had to adjust our budget accordingly to plan on that office being closed in the first part of the year. That's what we've done.
So Kips, let me ask you this. Let's say, I think I heard somewhere we take in an additional $50,000 a month from the city. Is that correct?
Right now, we probably take in about $40,000 more a month, yes.
Okay, that's with the two girls in Malone all the time.
Yep.
So, this is just me. Everybody, nobody knows for sure, but I think, Kip, as we discussed this morning, probably late spring or mid-summer, this may be over. So say you took 6 months at 40, that's $250,000, $240,000. That we can probably say that office isn't going to be open till.
You haven't added that into the budget. No, she hasn't.
Yeah, correct.
We're going to reevaluate it every month, but let's just say
Yes.
that reduces the deficit down to $220,000. Donna, am I right? Or
Yes,
Fran?
yes, correct.
So
Yeah.
what would it take to go of what you've talked about for a tax increase and still keep us under? Will we have enough to? I'm just trying to. Maybe it would be 6 months or 7 months, but let's just say 6 just as a starting point. What would it cost? What would we have to raise to the tax to make up the difference?
At 220,000?
Yeah, 220. What would we need? How much more?
Well, you're gonna look at other areas too, Donna, yeah, right?
Yeah.
There's a few
No, I
areas
know.
that
I know there's other areas, but I was just thinking, Don, just to get an idea, you know what I'm saying? Just a rough idea.
We would have to increase the tax, we would have to max out the tax cap and then add another 125,000 to it. So you would easily be at an additional percent.
Yeah.
You'd be over the tax cap.
Yes. The reason,
Well,
so
1%
for leaving,
equals 200, 1% equals
It would be-
255,000.
one and a half, that's 1.5, it'd be around 180,000 would be 1%.
Okay,
So if we, just to keep in mind as well, when there's a carryover on the tax cap, that carryover helps us the following year. So right now, the way we've got it set up, we have $97,000 to carry over to 2022.
right,
What that does is that adds in above and beyond the tax capping increase. So if
Gotcha.
we were to run into a difficult year in 2022, we now have an additional $97,000 that we have room to work with under our taxes and
I
still not
understand.
exceed the tax cap. So that's why I left a portion for a
I got you.
carryover.
Kip, if, say you had a drop box in Saranac Lake though, and how long would it take from the time somebody drops something in that box to get it back in Saranac?
I mean, probably the same amount of time it takes for the drop box here in Malone. It's plus or minus 5 days. I mean, it can be as short as probably 3 days, it might be
Depending
as
on
much
mail
as
service.
6. It depends, you know, what day of the week it usually is that it gets dropped and just how much is dropped there.
Yeah.
We probably receive probably 100 drops in that box in the lobby a day. We're probably averaging 100 a day, plus probably another 100 a day through the mail.
So you don't know what's gonna happen down there, so you can't
Right.
judge until you know.
Right.
Okay.
Kip, I know that this is a really tough decision, but that it's impacted a lot by COVID. In previous years, how many transactions were done at the Saranac Lake office?
I really don't know. I couldn't give you a number, to be very honest with you. That would take a little bit of homework. I can tell you on a normal year, based upon sending 2 employees to Saranac Lake, mileage, expenses, that office typically loses $50,000 a year. What we make in revenue down there is short covering, that's what I usually lose, okay? So that, the office is not a moneymaker. It's not anything, but it was never intended to be a moneymaker. You know, as I told Mr. Maroon this morning, I'm sure he was around when that office was conceived by my predecessor. You know, it was something that was more of a convenience. But the flat number, you know, transactions wise, I can't really tell you, because, you know, sometimes we send down mail that comes in here, renewals and things with the girls to supplement their day, okay? And then they bring it back with them that night. But that office typically loses 50 grand a year. And that's based upon 2 employees with their benefits, mileage, and the expenses of keeping that office open, rent, so on and so forth.
And the rent's like 22,000 of that, so the
No, the rent
mileage-
is only 3,600.
Right.
We only pay, we get a heck
It's
of a
the
deal.
additional mileage and
Okay.
that, the 22
Yeah,
thousand.
3,600, that's not a
No,
lot of
it's
rent.
cheap.
Yeah, okay.
And you know, Harrietstown's been very good to work
Yeah.
with. It has nothing to do with that. It's just the economics of how we're doing business right now. Without being able to have that office open is what's driving this discussion. I mean,
The
you know,
social
anybody that's
distance.
been in that office realizes, you know, you can have this flow of coming in one door and out the other, but at the end of the day, if you have somebody taking a permit and you have the girls each working on a customer, you have 3 people probably within a diameter of 5 feet. It just doesn't work, okay? And that's at the end of the day, that's the problem with that. And, you know, hopefully, as Mr. Maroon and I talked, you know, hopefully we get a year from now, everything is back to normal and we'll re-examining having that office open to the residents. But, you know, when Donna asked me, you know, Kip, give me your real numbers of how things are operating right now and how you perceive the months going forward in next year. Those are the numbers I've given her.
So Kip, we also discussed down the road, maybe instead of every day, just a few days a week.
Yep. We once things got back to normal, I would examine any idea anybody might have, okay? There's nothing on the table. I mean, we get to a point where we can get in there and do some renovations. There's nothing to say that that can't happen.
Right,
But-
we'll continue to pay our rent to keep that
Yes, we're gonna-
office available to us.
You know, as I told you, you know, we put in the budget to continue paying the rent for next year because I don't want to close that office and then have to look for another place to open back up down there. So at that price, it can be a broom closet for us for the coming months until we get past this pandemic. But nobody has a crystal ball that can tell me when this is all gonna be over, number one. And number two, the way the governor and the commissioner of motor vehicles, you know, there is no end in sight to us being able to open without appointments, which is another part of this. You know, you need somebody down there taking appointments. You need people that will be able to work with the people in line. So there's a lot of factors involved in this. But I guess the short answer is, yeah, I mean, we get to a point where we start coming out of this and we feel, the board feels that we should open that 1 day a week, 2 days a week, 3 days a week, whatever it may be. I am open to any idea. The same way I was open 3 years ago to expanding hours up there in the summertime, which we tried. So Eddie, I'm open to anything, Mr. Maroon.
Okay. I got it.
So I think during the next week, I think we can continue to, work on, making some adjustments to this. Is there any other suggestions?
Where are we with Cornell Cooperative?
Yep, so I budgeted in the previous years, they received $294,000. At this point, I've budgeted $176,400 in the budget.
Okay. Is that, are there any people losing a job because of that?
Not to my knowledge. I did meet with the interim executive director and as we talked through everything, he was hoping for 200,000. And as I make adjustments, I can try to achieve that.
I mean,
Oh,
none of their senior staff are gonna be lost, like, what's her name?
not to my knowledge.
Okay,
Same thing with, soil and water, because I know those were two line items that took a big hit during the beginning
So
of COVID.
they requested 77,292 right now, and the budget is 48,307. But I do think
And
that. they
Their
maybe have some-
request of 77,000 was 20% under what they requested last year as well, right, Donna?
Right, but there was also a 10,000 figure in there that, they
Tightened up.
they removed. So that would have brought the request to 67,292. And right now in the budget is 48,307.
okay.
So that's a 44% reduction, okay.
Yeah, I've budgeted right now 48,307.
Mhm.
I have had a conversation this week with Chastity. She's actually going to go into real property and take a look at our GIS possibility, so that might be a possibility to be able to do some reallocation.
That'd be great.
In our audit report, we have to report on soil and water. So just to also keep that in mind, that they have a significant value to their fund balance at this time. So if
Even for a year.
it was short, if you know, being a difficult year in the county, they do have other options available, just
Okay.
like we do.
But if they could help us out with that GIS, that'd be a help to
That'd
both
be-
of us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, correct. And so maybe we can do something with that.
I'm very concerned about, obviously, I'm on those committees, but, I mean, we're reducing almost by, well, 50% for one and 40% for the other. That's a pretty big blow for the communities, you know, the things that they're offering. I'm hoping that, I guess I can talk to them and see that we aren't, how are they gonna cut their programs, you know, and what programs are gonna get cut, not just manpower, but what programs are gonna get cut going forward.
And I'll take a look at those too and see if there's any room once I do
Right.
some,
No, I know,
I
and
just-
I know you're working on it and say it's tough times for
Yeah.
everybody, but, Donna,
So
the
for-
sheet that you sent out, the tentative allocations for 2021, is
Right.
there, in the budget sheet that you send out, is it 196,000 for each line item? It's a little bit, it's well organized, right? But you don't have a sheet, another Excel spreadsheet with the allocations for 2021 with just by that department in the same sort of style? So I don't see telephone, all I just kind of see what they asked for, what they were.
I can do that.
Okay, well, not if it's a lot of work, just something, you know, a
No.
quick glance, you know?
It's just a selection, it's just a clicking and changing. I
Okay.
didn't run it by, like department, but I did have that last night when I took a look at it, but what it does is it gave me all, like, every personnel line in the county.
Gotcha.
So I thought, well, that's not gonna work, so,
No.
yeah, but we can try to shorten what you see, is basically that's what you wanna see, right? Kinda like the bottom lines.
Just for me, but like I said, don't go out of line, you're busy right now, but
Yep, we'll get you that,
thank you.
yep.
So Fran, you mentioned that Soil and Water has a balance in their assets.
They have a healthy fund balance at this point, yes.
And their healthy fund balance, what is their healthy fund balance like?
Just 1 second, I can tell you. It's in the audit report, so I just have to open that.
And the auditor picked this up, we didn't, because we don't see the books that close.
Right.
Sorry, it just takes me a minute to get to that point.
That's okay.
Donna, well, he's looking that up. Have you factored in the increase in the retirement system?
Yes, that's in there,
The increase that just came out?
yes,
I mean,
yes.
okay. Okay.
Yep. We actually initially had budgeted a little bit more and Fran has since gone in and reduced since we've gotten figures from state comptroller.
Okay,
So-
just checking.
We felt that was a little bit of a gift compared to where we started,
I
believe
had,
it or not.
I had anticipated a much larger increase in retirement. It ended up coming through at a 2% increase.
That's good.
And we get projections, we get a projection and then an estimate and then our actual bill. So we have received our projection for 2022, which is what we pay out in 2021. So we've already received that and we're budgeted pretty close to
Okay.
what the projection is.
Great.
I'm trying to find that.
Mhm.
It's a very long audit.
Thought it was 700.
But the bad news about the whole thing is that there is gonna be some effects to services somewhere through this budget, we don't have a choice.
Well, what's really, as I said in the beginning, so difficult when it comes to state reimbursements is, to get that 20% withholding on every invoice.
Yeah, because that's different than just cutting our budget.
That's just, how do you budget for that?
If you're just cutting it 20% off the top, then you can figure out other ways to do things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
Soil and water balance is 748.
So the,
I'm sorry, 737,000 is the fund balance for soil and water.
so they have a fund balance of $737,000.
Yes.
and how much should they normally have?
I don't know what the state's recommendation for them. is at this point. I just know the comment had come up during the audit that was a very healthy fund balance.
You're right, we've never had this discussion before with the auditor.
I think some of it had to do with too, the way that she was putting money in, because some of that money, when they do the grants to when they get dispersed, it could be like a 3-year window. So it could be like on Chasta's side how she's coding things as well, I believe, but she's working on it, I think, so.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had a good discussion this week.
Yep.
So I will look at those two those two that you mentioned and see if we can do something else.
I mean, if soil and water's at 77,292 right now, that's what you said, right?
That's what they requested.
And what do
Right
you
now,
have?
I budgeted 48,397.
Okay,
So I'll work on increasing that.
well, I mean,
And,
I'm talking about increasing it, I'm talking about decreasing it.
oh, okay.
$737,000 fund balance. Ed, even if they have $250,000 next year in grants, they've still got $500,000 left. That's, if you look at the percentages, that's more than we have almost in the county fund balance, percentage-wise. I mean, that's a lot of money to be carrying over every year.
If it isn't the book, way they do their bookkeeping, where the money's gonna be spent, just sits there until they need it
Well,
for.
why don't we have Donna check on that? Just look it over.
Right, is it grants that are, that they're holding and waiting to have
What-
reimbursement?
What I was told was, and this happens, we just went in and did this, okay? And it hadn't been done. Sometimes people put purchase orders in, and so it shows that there's an expense off their budget and off your bottom line. And if you don't use those, they need to be canceled. And so there was some discrepancies from my understanding around actual purchase orders that just needed to be canceled, so that then their actual amounts in the
Would
system
be small.
matched
Okay,
what was in the
why
statement.
don't you just
So this
check it out?
is-
Yeah,
Donna,
yeah,
why don't you check and see what they,
I
you know,
will,
really-
I will,
okay.
yeah,
Now this budget that you put together is based on the assumption that 20% is not coming?
in some in a couple departments, we did that, but we actually budgeted the revenue for the Department of Social Services, and then they maneuvered some programs so that less would be charged back to the county. And so there was a lot of discussion around that. And you'll see in some of the budget lines, they are significantly less based on information they've already received. So, let me see. DSS's is 53, so if you go to, let's look at the revenues on that. I'll give you the page number in just a minute. If that's helpful. 51 too. So DSS is, if you want to go to, start on page 15, if you, look at some of their revenue lines, for example, like, SNAP, and, we actually got notification that the Family Children Block Grant was going to be increased, so we did that. But if you go to like, medical assistance, special needs for elderly, family assistance, DSS admin, that, in 2020, we adopted 3.1 million and we decreased it to 2.9 million, in revenues. So, program costs at DSS, we budgeted $6,187,000, and in 2020, we budgeted almost 6.6 million, so that's another decrease. So we have budgeted some of the decrease as far as revenues go. But, again, the challenge is on the invoices versus actual decrease as a whole. So they moved some things around so that there's more, we're reallocating some federal funds to help work on that budget. One of the reasons we're seeing that some of the revenues that we're seeing is because, we are getting the, indigent legal services grant. So that was a few $100,000 increase, the, hurling, revenues through ILS. The DA increased his revenues a little bit, and the CARES Act, so transportation, we put in 250,000, I think, from the CARES Act to offset our public transportation department next year.
Okay.
I
So,
think it was 250.
I don't want to keep repeating, but just, Phil, I want to go over it one more time. We're
Yeah.
talking about what you've got in this budget right here with the gap still. It's an increase of how much percent over last year?
1.32%.
1.32 plus, and the cap is 1.97, and 1% equals 255,000, Fran?
Around 180,000.
1% equals,
Around 180, it's 183,000
Okay.
would be about 1% increase.
okay. What's the
The two-
255?
So that was last year's allowance for uncollected taxes, that was 1.5. This year, because of the increase in the levy, our allowance for uncollected is 260. So what we do is we take the levy that we tax.
Okay,
17.66, we reduce it by the 260 to get to what we actually budget in anticipated tax
Which
dollars.
was 17.4. That's in this budget.
That's the 260 discrepancy.
I don't really have it in front of me, so what do you have in there for when we have the tax sale?
How much?
Or revenue for the tax sales.
I'll just,
She's looking,
give me one
Paul.
second.
Okay. And Donna, all of our, well, we don't know about grants, so we can't really carry them all over like we usually do.
Well, we've had discussions, so one of the things we have, in every department budget meeting, we ask about rollover money, right? If they've saved some from this year that's going into next year. And the question
Right.
asked is, we asked the question, and there are some revenues from that in here because they allocated the expenses. If they aren't
Okay.
allocating the expenses, then we don't count their rollover as revenue. I think, like, public health came back and said we could use 30,000 of their district rollover money to offset their budget. So that, you'll see that as revenue, but that's technically a rollover. We haven't heard, we haven't heard on the 911 grant money. In this budget, I did take the PSAP money that we normally would get, and I decreased that by 20%, and I did put that in as revenue to offset, that's to offset dispatcher salaries. So, Ricky and I check with him every few days. He thought that was a reasonable calculation to just take 20% off that. It could be more, it could be
Okay.
less. It's a little bit of a, gamble.
So the gain on tax acquired property, I budgeted $100,000. Generally, we budget $50,000 per foreclosure year. I do anticipate we may possibly be able to foreclose next year on 4 tax years. We have our 13 and 14s. They're being worked on currently. We do believe the moratorium will be lifted next Thursday. If it is, we will be ready to notice on the 13 and 14 years. It's not going to be a good time of the year to do this, but we have to act on this. Once the 13 and 14 years are complete and sent up to the judge after that 90-day notice period, 15s and 16s will be nearly ready to go as well. So by the time our 90-day notice period is done, 15s and 16s should be ready to be sent up to the judges, or noticed and then sent up as well. So next year, we could see if it's able to move through courts fast enough, we could see 4 years worth of properties foreclosed on.
And that would be, we'd probably have a spring sale.
If it can get through courts quick enough, then absolutely. We auction within 2 months of taking title. We could.
Yeah.
It's just with the time frame. We're ready to go if that moratorium is lifted October 1st. We've been anticipating that.
Donna, what do you have set aside in contingency?
1 million.
Okay,
Also want to mention that sales tax, the reason for the small reduction, it's about a $250,000 reduction, is to anticipate the state taking nearly 300,000 additional next year for the hospital
Hospital.
fund.
Hospitals, that's right.
So that's the reason for that decrease. It's Franklin County's estimated contribution twice next year will be 147 each time. So that's why I anticipated around 300,000.
Yeah, at least,
Mm-hmm.
what is it called again? What's the technical term?
Distressed hospital fund.
And
What
if
is it?
they don't use it,
It's the governor's words are distressed hospital fund.
Oh, yes,
And-
yes, okay.
Yeah, so they're taking, it was supposed to be 2020 and 2021, 300,000 each year. 300 million each year. They are taking, from the counties as well as the city, but they're doing it all in 2021 because they didn't act on it quick enough to take it in 2020. If the hospitals are not in need of this $600 million, it goes to the state's general fund.
So we don't even get it back if they don't use it.
So why don't they
Nice
say,
guy.
yeah,
so ridiculous.
We just needed to anticipate that next year, so that's why I slightly reduced sales tax.
Okay.
But he increases our healthcare costs.
So Donna, what's the next step? To try and get this number balanced, or are you gonna try to, I mean, what are you folks thinking up there?
yeah, so I want to go through the budget again. I want to look at our, at some of our figures. Is there room? Should I reduce contingency, by $100,000? That's a possibility. I'll look at the revenues, through the county clerk DMV office. Again, Kip and and Fran will have a discussion around that. And I am confident that we will be able to bridge this gap. I really wanted to hear your thoughts and guidance and suggestions around doing that. So I think by next Thursday, we'll be able to do that. And I can keep you updated throughout
Well,
the.
I think what we should do is you do that, and the legislators mull this stuff over, and maybe they'll have some different ideas they can
That's
run by
right.
you to, and come up with something. Fran, what if we went a little higher in the tax increase, not to the cap, but a little higher? I know you're trying to save it for next year for fiscal 21, 22, but hopefully by then things will be increased a little. I mean, if you shave a little bit everywhere, nobody gets hurt too bad, and maybe we can, do something. I'm just thinking.
Yeah.
We could
Look at
go up
everything.
higher on that,
Yeah,
yeah.
we'll take a look at everything.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll get everyone that spreadsheet as far as, basically, I just wanna be clear, by department, you'd like kind of a history of maybe 19, 20, and 21?
Yes, please.
Okay, certainly, that, you'll have that.
The only thing is that we're charging for those every time we send them out now.
No, only in an email, Donnie. I don't need the paper copy.
The only thing I would say is, there's probably gonna be some money coming to the states from Washington, not till after the election. But it's not gonna be the amount he wants, so we may be somewhere, around 10% to 12% reduction, at least what I've
Yeah.
was told last night. And that would be good for us. And Fran, that would help you with, we would have some extra carryover money too for next year. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
so we won't know certain before this budget has to go to hearing, I don't think, but we'll see.
Let's hope that the money comes to the counties and not to the state first, that's all.
Yeah.
Hope everybody gets something.
Yeah,
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Donna, have you had any legway with the contracts for the snow and ice for the other, for the towns? Heard anything?
Well, Paul Lozon's going to set up a meeting, on that. He's-
after Ed takes full.
After Ed, Adams is, officially, in
Gotcha.
his position, so, we've taken
Yep.
that into consideration.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, Kip, it's encouraging to hear about the Dropbox up down in the southern end. Is there a timing that you're thinking about that?
Well, we've got to talk to transportation a little bit, to figure out what would work best for them.
Okay.
Yeah, that's encouraged. So I'll be in touch.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
We'll
you.
get some, we may have some questions for you, Don.
Yep, absolutely. And ideas, everything is welcome. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bye,
Yeah.
everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, thank
Bye.
you.
Take care.